History has been telling us a comforting lie, a lie repeated in textbooks, documentaries, and classrooms for generations, that humanity has been climbing steadily upward from primitive cave dwellers to masters of technology. That the past was simple, crude, and ignorant, while the present represents the peak of intelligence and progress. But what if that story is wrong? What if beneath the surface of our modern confidence lies a far more unsettling truth that ancient civilizations sometimes knew things we have forgotten? Right now, archaeologists and scientists are uncovering artifacts that quietly challenge the entire narrative of progress. Massive stone structures built with precision modern engineers struggle to replicate. Materials that survive 2,000 years in the ocean while our concrete crumbles within decades. Glass crafted in the Roman Empire that manipulates light using structures so small they belong in modern nanotechnology labs. And weapons so mysterious that even today historians cannot fully reconstruct how they worked. These are not myths, and they are not conspiracy theories. They are real objects preserved in museums embedded in ruins and documented by modern science. In this investigation, we are opening 5 historical black files, ancient technologies that should not exist according to the timeline we believe in. Each one forces us to confront a disturbing possibility. Progress may not be a straight line. Knowledge can be discovered lost, buried, and forgotten for centuries. And if that is true, then the question becomes far more dangerous than any mystery itself. How much of human history have we misunderstood? And how many breakthroughs are still waiting beneath our feet? For centuries, we have viewed history through a very convenient lens. In this version of the past, ancient people were primitive, limited by superstition, crude tools, and a lack of scientific understanding. Meanwhile, the modern world stands as proof of human superiority. We build cities of glass and steel, split the atom, and send machines beyond the edge of our solar system. It feels natural to assume that every generation before us knew less than we do today. But the deeper researchers dig into the past, the harder that assumption becomes to defend. Archaeology is quietly revealing a pattern that does not fit the story of constant progress. Across multiple continents, investigators keep encountering objects and structures that challenge the timeline of technological development. Enormous stone constructions whose precision rivals modern engineering. Materials that remain intact after thousands of years of exposure to harsh environments. Artifacts whose internal structures only became visible after the invention of powerful microscopes. These discoveries raise an uncomfortable possibility. Human knowledge does not simply accumulate, it can also disappear. Civilizations collapse, libraries burn, master craftsmen die without passing on their secrets. When that happens, entire technologies can vanish from history as if they never existed. Centuries later, new societies rediscover fragments of that lost knowledge and celebrate them as breakthroughs. The truth is that progress may not move like an arrow pointing forward. It behaves more like a spiral looping through cycles of discovery, loss, and rediscovery. And once you begin to see history this way, the ruins scattered across the world start to look less like relics of primitive cultures and more like silent evidence of achievements we are only beginning to understand. In the thin mountain air of the Andes, nearly 10,000 feet above sea level, lies a place that forces even modern engineers to pause in disbelief. The fortress of Sacsayhuaman rises above the ancient Inca capital of Cusco, its enormous stone walls zigzagging across the hillside like the spine of some prehistoric giant. When Spanish conquistadors first saw it in the 16th century, they could hardly comprehend what they were looking at. These were not ordinary stones. Some of the blocks weighed more than 800,000 pounds, massive monoliths carved from gray limestone and somehow transported up steep mountain terrain long before the arrival of modern machinery. But the true marvel is not only their size, it is the precision. Each stone is cut into a complex polygonal shape, sometimes with a dozen angles, sometimes with 30 or more, yet every surface fits perfectly against the next. There is no mortar holding them together, no cement filling the seams. The stones rely entirely on their own weight and flawless geometry. Even today, you cannot slide a sheet of paper between many of the joints. Over the centuries, powerful earthquakes have shaken the region, toppling Spanish colonial buildings in the city below. Yet the walls of Sacsayhuaman remain standing, their massive stones shifting slightly during tremors and settling back into place without collapsing. For generations, observers struggled to explain how a civilization without iron tools, wheeled vehicles, or large draft animals could possibly move stones of such scale. Legends grew quickly, stories of lost technologies, mysterious chemicals that softened rock, even ancient visitors from beyond the stars. But the most compelling explanation reveals something far more profound than magic. The Inca likely relied on patience, mathematics, and relentless labor. Using a technique known as stone scribing, builders repeatedly lowered and raised each block, marking where it touched the stone below, and chiseling away the smallest imperfections until the surfaces locked together like pieces of an immense puzzle. It was slow, exhausting work that could take weeks for a single joint, yet multiplied by thousands of workers through the imperial labor system. That determination produced walls designed not merely for a lifetime, but for eternity. In a quiet gallery of the British Museum sits an object so small and delicate that most visitors could easily walk past it without a second glance. Yet this fragile piece of ancient glass hides one of the most astonishing technological mysteries ever discovered in the ancient world. It is known as the Lycurgus cup, a Roman artifact crafted sometime in the 4th century AD. At first glance, it appears to be nothing more than a decorative drinking vessel carved with a detailed scene from Greek mythology showing the tragic fate of King Lycurgus. Under ordinary lighting, the cup looks cloudy and green, like aged glass that has slowly weathered the centuries. But when light shines through it from behind, something extraordinary happens. The entire vessel suddenly transforms, glowing with a deep crimson red, as if lit from within by fire. Turn the light off and it becomes green again. Turn it on, and the red returns instantly. For decades, scientists struggled to understand how this was possible. Glass should not behave like this. It cannot simply change color depending on the direction of light. The answer remained a mystery until the late 20th century, when researchers examined the cup using an electron microscope powerful enough to reveal structures invisible to the human eye. What they found stunned them. Embedded throughout the glass were microscopic particles of gold and silver, each measuring only about 50 nanometers across. At this scale, metals interact with light in unusual ways, scattering different wavelengths depending on how light passes through the material. In modern laboratories, engineers deliberately create similar nanostructures to build optical sensors and advanced materials. Yet Roman craftsmen had achieved this effect more than 15 centuries ago without microscopes, without modern chemistry, and without any theoretical understanding of nanotechnology. Whether by careful experimentation or remarkable intuition, they produced a material whose behavior scientists would only begin to understand in the late 20th century. The Lycurgus cup is more than an ancient artifact. It is a reminder that the boundary between ancient craftsmanship and advanced science may be far thinner than we once believed. In the brutal clashes of the medieval world, few objects inspired as much awe and fear as the legendary blades forged in the city of Damascus. During the Crusades, European knights marched into the Middle East confident in their armor and heavy iron swords, believing their weapons represented the pinnacle of military technology. But when they faced warriors armed with Damascus steel, that confidence quickly began to crumble. These blades looked different from anything the Europeans had seen before. Across their surface ran delicate wave-like patterns, almost like ripples moving through water frozen in metal. Yet the beauty of these swords was only the beginning. What truly terrified their opponents was how they performed in battle. Damascus blades could slice through armor with startling efficiency, while remaining remarkably flexible and resistant to breaking. While many European swords bent chipped or shattered under stress, Damascus steel seemed to possess an impossible balance of hardness and resilience. Stories spread quickly across battlefields and royal courts alike. One famous legend claimed that Sultan Saladin once demonstrated the power of such a blade by tossing a silk scarf into the air and allowing it to fall gently onto the sword's edge, where it supposedly split in two under its own weight. Whether the story is exaggerated or not, modern scientific analysis has confirmed that these blades were indeed extraordinary. When researchers examined surviving Damascus swords under powerful microscopes, they discovered structures within the metal that resembled carbon nanotubes, microscopic cylinders that modern materials science considers among the strongest structures known. These formations likely emerged during the forging process from a special type of Indian steel called woots, combined with trace elements and organic materials introduced during heating. Over time, however, the specific ore sources changed, and the carefully guarded knowledge of the forging process disappeared. By the 18th century, the true method of creating Damascus steel had vanished, leaving behind only the legend of blades whose secrets even modern metallurgy struggles to fully recreate. Along the rugged coastlines of Italy, where waves have crashed against stone for thousands of years, stand the quiet remains of ancient Roman harbors. At first glance, they appear like any other weathered ruins, partially submerged, worn smooth by centuries of wind and salt water. But to engineers and geologists, these structures represent something far more astonishing. Many of these concrete piers and breakwaters were built more than 2,000 years ago, yet they continue to endure relentless ocean currents that would quickly destroy most modern coastal construction. In the modern world, reinforced concrete exposed to seawater often begins to deteriorate within a few decades. Saltwater penetrates the material, steel reinforcement corrodes cracks, widen, and eventually entire structures weaken and fail. Yet Roman concrete seems to behave in the opposite way. Instead of breaking down over time, it gradually becomes stronger. When scientists began studying samples taken from these ancient structures, they discovered that Roman engineers had created something fundamentally different from modern Portland cement. Their mixture combined lime with volcanic ash known as pozzolana and seawater. What seemed like a simple combination turned out to be a remarkable chemical system. As seawater slowly seeps into microscopic cracks inside the concrete, it triggers reactions that form rare crystalline minerals such as aluminum tobermorite. These crystals grow through the internal structure of the material, binding it together more tightly with each passing century. In effect, the concrete heals itself, turning the destructive force of seawater into the very mechanism that strengthens it. The Romans did not fight against nature's chemistry. They harnessed it. Their harbors, piers, and seawalls were built not for decades, but for ages. Today, as modern infrastructure around the world struggles with maintenance and decay, the durability of Roman concrete stands as a humbling reminder that some of the most sophisticated engineering solutions may already have been discovered long ago and then quietly forgotten by history. In the late 7th century, the fate of an empire and perhaps the balance of power in Europe hung by a fragile thread. Constantinople, the last great bastion of the Byzantine Empire, stood surrounded by the immense naval forces of the expanding Arab Caliphate. From the walls of the city, defenders looked out across the sea and saw the horizon filled with ships. Contemporary chronicles describe hundreds, perhaps thousands of vessels crowding the waters, their sails forming a moving wall that threatened to suffocate the city from the sea. The defenders were outnumbered, their supplies limited, and the outcome seemed inevitable. Then, according to historical accounts, a strange new weapon appeared on the Byzantine ships. Mounted on their prows were bronze tubes shaped like the mouths of beasts, lions, or dragons, designed to unleash something no enemy fleet had ever faced before. As the invading ships closed the distance, a deafening roar echoed across the water. From those metal mouths burst streams of liquid fire projecting outward across the sea. But this was not ordinary flame. When the burning substance struck the water, it did not extinguish. Instead, it spread blazing violently across the surface of the sea itself. Sailors leapt overboard to escape the flames, only to discover that the water offered no refuge. The fire clung to wood sails and flesh alike, and the more water was thrown upon it, the more fiercely it seemed to burn. This terrifying weapon became known as Greek fire, and for centuries its exact composition remained one of the most closely guarded secrets of the Byzantine state. Modern historians believe it may have been based on petroleum or naphtha combined with substances such as quicklime, which produces intense heat when reacting with water. Delivered through pressurized siphons that functioned much like early flamethrowers, the weapon turned the sea itself into a battlefield of fire. For nearly 500 years, Greek fire helped protect Constantinople from invasion. Yet when the empire eventually weakened and the city fell, the formula vanished along with the engineers who knew its secrets, leaving behind one of the most formidable lost technologies in the history of warfare. When these stories are placed side by side, a quiet but unsettling pattern begins to emerge. The ancient world was not simply a place of primitive tools and simple ideas, as we often imagine. Instead, it was a landscape of experimentation, ingenuity, and knowledge that sometimes rivaled our own in surprising ways. From the massive stones of Sacsayhuaman that defy easy explanation to Roman glass that behaves like modern nanotechnology, to legendary blades and materials whose secrets vanished with the civilizations that created them, history reveals something deeply humbling about human progress. Knowledge is fragile. It does not always survive the rise and fall of empires. Libraries burn, trade routes collapse, and the last masters of a craft eventually disappear. When that happens, entire technologies can fade into silence, leaving behind only artifacts that future generations struggle to understand. What we call innovation today may sometimes be nothing more than rediscovery. The story of humanity then may not be a straight path toward greater intelligence, but a long spiral of discovery, loss, and rediscovery. And if that is true, the ruins scattered across our planet may still hold countless forgotten ideas, waiting patiently beneath the dust, ideas capable of reshaping how we understand the past, and perhaps even the future. If these stories teach us anything, it is this progress is far more fragile than we like to believe. Civilizations rise, discover extraordinary ideas, and then sometimes quietly, sometimes catastrophically lose them. Knowledge disappears not because it was impossible, but because it was not preserved, not shared, or not understood by the generations that followed. For a modern society that moves faster than any before it, that lesson should feel deeply uncomfortable. Technology alone does not guarantee wisdom. What truly defines a civilization is its ability to protect knowledge, question its own assumptions, and pass understanding forward, rather than letting it vanish into history. Perhaps the greatest danger is not that the past was more advanced than we think, but that we may repeat the same cycle of forgetting. If this investigation changed the way you see history, take a moment to support the channel, like the video, share it with someone curious about the past, and subscribe for more deep investigations into the hidden stories of our world.